1,
2,
3,
4.
Monster movie.
Fun time, go! Monster movie.
Fun time, go. Monster
Movie.
Fun time.
Go!
Monster movie. Fun time, go.
With Precious D and Honeybee.
Fun time, go!
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, welcome to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. I'm Precious D. My other host, Honeybee, is not here today because we're doing one of those role-playing episodes we do every now and then. Today, I have with me Clipper Arnold, and he is here to talk about his expansion for a game he already has. It's called Toku Legends, and it is funding now on Kickstarter. Welcome to the show, Clipper.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk more about the game.
Yeah, so this is an expansion for Nebula Chaos?
Yes, exactly. So, Nebula Chaos is a sci-fi space opera tabletop RPG. It runs on what we call the Polyhedra Core engine, which is sort of a system that I've been running for probably over a decade. It's pretty straightforward for the most part, like a 2d6 plus stat system. I don't know how familiar you or your audience might be with those mechanic minutia, but basically it's just built to facilitate relatively like straightforward, quick and easy role playing, but with enough depth to give people a robust experience. So we made a game called Justice Velocity in 2019, which is a Fast and Furious inspired tabletop RPG, kind of like action movie, buff guys, explosions, that kind of thing. And we followed that up with Nebula Chaos, which is the same system, but it's in space, with laser swords, goofy aliens, stuff like that. And then Toku Legends is a supplement for Nebula Chaos, which is, a tokusatsu inspired Henshin Heroes type of thing. So, Power Rangers, Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, basically sci-fi squad-based superheroes is the whole angle. So
Yes, and that is why we have you here today, because we talk about kaiju movies here, but we also talk about related role-playing games when they come up, and there seems to be more and more of them these days, which is great.
I saw you guys had some Power Rangers episodes on there and stuff. I actually, I was doing a lot of research and I was like, oh, this is a kaiju podcast. I'm like, I don't know. There are kaiju in Toku Legends, but I was like, for a moment, I was like, I don't know if we have enough kaiju. And then I was like, oh, they do other stuff too. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly kaiju, but I mean, there's, Power Rangers, there's a kaiju at the end of every episode. And it, it's related. At G-Fest last year, I did a panel on kaiju in role-playing games, and it seems like enough new stuff has come out this year. I'll do an update to that panel if they select me to do so. So we'll certainly be talking about Toku Legends if we get to do that panel.
Cool.
But it's all variations on that theme. As long as a big monster shows up at some point, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, cool.
So what are you adding to Nebula Chaos with this supplement specifically? What kind of new rules and options are in the Toku Legends?
Sure. So we're trying to keep it quick and punchy, super tight, trying to do like the page range we're shooting for is 16 to 24 pages because we're trying to make it, a zine with not overburdening people with too many rules rather, but giving them enough to run the type of game that we want to play. And so that being said, It's the main differences between Toku Legends and Nebula Chaos are the changes that we made to adapt it to a more squad-based superhero system instead of, space opera type of thing, right?
Mhm.
So there's still like blasters, swords, laser swords, psionic abilities, stuff like that have like a good crossover between the two. But the stuff that makes it more uniquely Toku there's a henshin mechanic, right? So on your character sheet, there's a civilian mode and then there's a henshin mode. And you can transform between the two. It has an effect on your energy points, and there's some sort of like mechanical incentive in some instances where you do want to be in civilian mode before you ultimately transform. And that's just sort of alluding to, a lot of Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, etc., sort of plays on that angle of like, that there's something outside of your hero mode that you have to engage in, like you have to go to a day job or whatever, and so there's some like role playing opportunities there, but also, like in Power Rangers or something, sometimes the putties get sprung on the heroes before they have time to transform, so you have to do a little bit of back and forth and build up to that cool moment. So that's sort of like the henshin mechanic is sort of alluding to that, right? Just like the power fantasy of transforming from your regular mode into the super powered suit type of thing. But also the energy point system was one of the elements that we changed. So I guess this sort of ties into that too, is like when you're in civilian mode, it starts as it would in any of our other games, right? Which is where you have an energy point total. It starts at its maximum and it goes down. But once you transform, you start at 0 and you build up energy points for every moment of combat, or what we call tense situations. And that's sort of also in the Toku vein of like, you don't just walk into a room as Kamen Rider and use your most powerful attack and then leave, right? You're building up to those moments. So we have that in the energy point system, but we also have something called a squad point system, which is another table where you're building up throughout the course of a session through collaborated maneuvers and teamwork, etc. Points that let you do special abilities or special effects. Some of those are like, finishing moves or ultimate team attacks, but they're also like sometimes support abilities, like you can use your squad points that you've built up to save an ally from like a fire building, a flaming building falling on top of his head. There's an ability called emergency extraction, stuff like that. So but basically just trying to replicate that, like that energy and like the momentum of some sort of like tokusatsu show where this all builds up throughout the course of an episode until it gets released in a very dramatic climactic moment. So
yeah, you can't just go straight to Megazord as soon as the putties show up and just stomp on them all.
Right. Yeah, it's a crescendo.
Yeah, you got to build up to it. Though I think it'd be hilarious if they actually did that one time. Just went, let's just cut it splat.
Why didn't they just take the Eagles to Mordor,
Yeah. Eagles are not taxis.
But yeah, so those are like the core like mechanical differences in this system, but then there's also like, we made a bunch of unique abilities and weapons and items and vehicles and enemies to more fit the theme more appropriately. There is also a bit of mecha rules for when the kaijin turns into a kaiju, of course, and you have to combine and use a co-piloted 5-person mech to take it down. So
right. And when it gets to that point, do the individual players still have things they have to do, each person doing something on their turn, or do they just decide as a group what the mech is going to do, or how does that work?
Actually both of those. So there's 2 different ways to run it. One is what we call piloting roles spelled ROLES. And that's basically like, you have one person responsible for moving the legs, you have one person responsible for ranged weapons, one person responsible for the melee, and then if you have more players than that, there's also someone working communications or the computer targeting system. So that's one way. That's how I ran it in our test sessions, and it actually works surprisingly well. But there's also the alternative optional rule, which is committee, which is basically you just treat the mech as a single player character, and
Mhm.
everyone sort of decides as a group what actions it will take for that turn. And so that might be more appropriate for, like if you're running a 9-person group or something like that, it's easier to just get everyone to agree on what the mech should do rather than parting out each little finger or something like that, presumably. So,
I've seen
yeah,
a
both
similar.
of those.
I've seen a similar thing in lots of starship-based games,
Yeah.
where when combat starts, each player has a different role they have to do in each round. Engineers got to tune things up, and the weapon guys got to take aim, and the navigator has to maneuver and that kind of stuff. And it
Yeah, definitely
it
that
keeps
kind of
everybody
vibe.
involved instead of just the captain pulling the trigger, and while everybody else sits around and watches.
Yeah, and like those games, I mean, like presumably, I mean, I guess it depends on the game, but at least the way that we run it, like we've only whipped out the transforming mech once in like 8 sessions. And I think it'll probably make another appearance in the finale here this week. But it's just one of those things where it's like you're not running it necessarily every session, but when it comes out, it's a big dramatic moment, right? So. Also, I should say it's not like with that in mind, a lot of our rules that use what people might call subsystems is they're typically built to be something that's like quick and punchy and easy and adaptable. That way you're not reading like 30 pages of mecha rules just to run it for like that one session, right? Or 30 pages of starship rules. It's supposed to be relatively seamless, relatively simple and straightforward, just to get that narrative experience while also having enough of a mechanical depth to sort of back it up. So like if anyone's listening to this and they're like, oh nice, I'm gonna be running a mecha game and a mech's gonna come out every session, this might not be the game for that. But if you are wanting to throw it in to get that big climactic moment, that's sort of what we have it there for, So
Okay. Now I have Nebula Chaos. I think I backed that Kickstarter a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever that was.
awesome. Thank you
So I
for
had this copy.
supporting us.
You're welcome. I had this copy sitting on my computer. I haven't actually had time to play. As we all know, and as I've said many times before, games are not for playing; they're for collecting. Gazing out longingly, hoping for the day you will get to play. But I want to say I really like the art in Nebula Chaos. Who did the art, and are they doing the art on this game as well?
Yeah, so I also am a fan of the art. I'm not personally a stellar 2D artist, so I'm very appreciative of the people that do that kind of work. In Nebula Chaos specifically, the cover art was done by Armand Villavere, who is a comic book artist based out of Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I'm originally from. He did a comic book called Gladstone's School of World Conquerors, which is kind of cool. It's like a evil Teen Titans kind of thing. Okay. And he's just been an artist who I've thought was really cool for a while. So it's really nice when you get to like collaborate with people that you've admired and work with them on projects like this. So he did the cover. Metacomic Studios, who are based out of Indonesia, I've worked with them on quite a few projects, including our Mork Borg module that we made. They did the comic at the beginning of that, but they did most of the interior art. And then I also did one piece of art for it. It's the page that has all the aliens on it. There's like 30 aliens on the page. The alien species. That I did that page, but that's my only contribution in terms of artwork to that project. Also, Anders Carlson did the alpha art for it. So he has one page in there. And then Logan Stahl finally is the artist who did the individual figure art. So when there's all the pre-made characters and everything, that's his art there. And he has a very specific style. He specializes in doing science fantasy and sci-fi type of art. So he's a really cool dude too. In Toku Legends, however, we have one artist, and his name is Corey Lewis, and he's similarly to Armand Villaveras, just an amazing artist who I've admired for a very long time. He has a very specific style. He's worked on a lot of projects, and similarly, I was very ecstatic to have him, his help with putting Toku Legends together. So he's the sole artist on the Toku Legends zine, which is really cool.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how that all turns out. So, this is obviously this you care about. What inspired this? Did you grow up watching these kind of shows? Is that something you've always been a big fan of?
Yeah, I mean, so like obviously I was super into Power Rangers when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And increasingly I've gotten, really into the original Kamen Rider manga, the Go Ranger manga. I've been surrounded by like squad-based heroes media in some capacity. Like even in my mind, I feel like Sailor Moon is very similar to like Super Sentai in some ways, or
Mhm.
even like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have like some a family resemblance, if you will. But yeah, I just have always really liked the design of the characters, the helmets, the belts, this like merging between like sci-fi and bio and like magic and everything like that. It just is very evocative. All the heroes are always very colorful. There's this just a lot of unique elements, like this stuff that we were talking about before, like transforming heroes being like a core trope. Uh, Monsters that turn into giant kaijus that you need to take out with a mech is like just lots of those elements really speak to something specific in that genre that I'm really into. I mean, there's a lot of influences named in the zine, like towards the end and stuff like that. Some of those are more unconventional. I will say, like, personally, I haven't watched a lot of the source material of like Super Sentai. I'm more familiar with the manga and like a few of the shows. I am into Kamen Rider. Um, Probably not like the biggest Kamen Rider head on the planet, but I definitely like Kamen Rider. And then there's more like some more obscure or like left of center references as well. I really like Samurai Flamenco as well. I just want to give that one a quick shout out, and like Beautiful Joe and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. I try to pull from like a large web of influences, and try to do the source material justice as much as possible through like doing the research and everything as well. So
Did you get a chance to see Shin Kamen Rider when it was in the theater?
yeah, I saw it in theaters. It was only showing for
Yeah.
one day in New York. It was really funny too because I invited like probably 8 of my
Mhm.
friends, and it was one of those things where it's like I was very into going, like I could not miss it. And so I invited like a bunch of people who like might be interested in seeing this cool movie, and everyone surprisingly agreed to go. But then when I went to buy the tickets, there were only 3 tickets left, and then we found out who who really
Wow.
wanted to go. So but it was amazing. I mean, we bought the tickets at the last minute too, so of course we were like in the very front
Oof.
row with the big screen
Yeah.
hovering over us. Um, but I will say one of the most amazing movies I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anything quite exactly like that before, and I have a hard time believing that there's anything that's going to be made exactly like that ever again because it was just really like amazing,
Mhm.
Um, it's I don't even know how to describe it. Just very like cool moments, very like great storytelling. I'm amazed that they were able to condense like a whole season into like one
Yeah.
like movie. And I don't know, just a lot of great cinematography as well, really interesting shots. And just what I liked most, right, is like um it kept a very specific sort of tone throughout. There's a very unique tone to Ano, but that has crossover to the first Common Rider season, and also that it didn't lose just like the cool factor. Like I feel like that's a really big part of Toku, right? Is just seeing like him transform his motorcycle into like 50 jets and skyrocket into the sky only to do this giant rider kick like descending down from the
Mhm.
heavens. Like that's just like nothing beats that. You know, I was like almost like jumping out of my chair when I saw that, just like at how cool it was. You know.
Well, there was only about 5 people in the theater here. Yeah,
Oh,
well, I'm in a much
really?
smaller town, so there's not as. And for most of those Fathom events, whatever it is, there's usually only about 5 people in the theater here. Doesn't matter if it's
That's
it doesn't matter if
amazing.
it's
Yeah.
opera or riff tracks or Doctor Who or Shin Ultraman. There's only ever like 5 people in the theater, which is good.
Damn, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's good for me though. And I didn't know that much about Kamen Rider, but I took a friend who like Kamen Rider was their favorite thing, so she was able to fill me in on, oh yeah, that's from the show. No, that's a new thing. So it was good to have that expertise on hand to help me out. And then it appeared on Amazon like immediately, which I thought was weird. It took forever for Shin Ultraman to be available like on DVD, but they put Shin Kamen Rider up immediately almost.
Yeah, right. I still haven't seen Shin Ultraman either, and I think they released it the same night at that theater, so it was like you had to make a
Hmm.
choice, you
Oh, I
know,
saw months.
because it
I
was for
saw them
one
months
night
apart.
only, you know.
They were on months apart, and
Oh,
I think they
okay.
had 2 nights. They had like an English night and a subtitle night.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
I don't remember if Kamen Rider had that option though. I think it just had the one night here as well.
Hmm.
So what is your favorite Kozatsu?
You know, that's really hard to
Okay.
say because I feel like you know, it's I mean, I'm tempted to just say Shin Kamen Rider after just giving it that glowing review, but um yeah, I don't know. I try to pull from a lot. I'm watching Zero One right now, which is not great, but I'm
Well, it
like
doesn't. I didn't
working
mean
through it,
like
you
one
know.
specific. You know, like is it generally Power Rangers? There's not like one specific version of Power Rangers or what. Is it Kamen Rider in general or?
Probably Kamen Rider, I would say. I mean, definitely there's still like the heart of Power Rangers will like always live on
Right.
inside of me because I was like really into it as a kid, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I've been a lot more into Kamen Rider in recent years. There's just something it feels like it I mean, not that Super Sentai or Power Rangers doesn't have this, but it just has a very specific tonal
Mhm.
difference to me that I feel is like more
I'm
desirable
sure
personally. So,
most Americans Power Rangers was their gateway, their opening, their introduction.
mhm.
I was a little too old for Power Rangers when it came out, so I never really got into it because I could, I was just old enough to see all the flaws, the bad
Sure,
acting. It
yeah.
was the bad acting. It was just like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
not.
for sure.
But I've always been into Godzilla movies and that kind of thing. So, um, and in doing this show, of course, we're anything peripheral. It's coming across our view as we go through. On this show, we go through the history of this whole thing. So, when we got to that point, we had to talk about Power Rangers uh, and the Power Rangers
Oh,
movies.
yeah,
And
totally.
so, but we don't do too much
I
TV.
have to send you
Okay.
something. This is like a joke I made on the internet a while back. I guess for the listeners at home, here's the joke. It's someone spraying particles all over someone else, and it says, "Yeah, man. So Kamen Rider is actually made by the same guy who made Power Rangers, except in Japan they're called Super Sentai, and it falls under the Tokusatsu genre. Sentai just means fighting group, and Tokusatsu is special filming, which actually began with the original Godzilla." Uh, I've like
Yeah.
word vomited that whole paragraph to my wife like 6 times. So
Did it not take the first 5 times? Or she just tuned you out?
uh she's it's always she's like, "Wait, so what is it? Godzilla?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, so cuz it is funny. I mean, that's like in a very boiled down like explanation that's like what it
Right.
is, you know. But to anyone who's unfamiliar with it, it's just a mess of words, you know, which is like kind of
Right.
funny. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the funny thing too about like, calling it Toku Legends, right? I guess I mean anything, right? So like Tokusatsu, I think most people technically it means like special filming, special effects, right? Which dates back to Godzilla, monster movies, etc. But when people talk about toku or like tokusatsu, at least in the West, a lot of times they're referring specifically to like the brand of like transforming heroes, like Super Sentai or Kamen Rider or Power Rangers, right? Or Garo or so on and so forth. So it's it's definitely a term that has an interesting and nuanced and meaningful history. But it's also context dependent, right? So it's like a whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like people use the term kaiju when they really mean daikaiju, and it has a more generic meaning. But we all know what we mean when we say kaiju. We know we understand.
Sure, yeah.
What we're talking about. So, Toku Legends is funding on Kickstarter now. It's got about 5 days to go at the time of this recording. I'm gonna try to get this out later today, just so people have time to check it out. But I believe you did reach your funding goal already, though, right?
Yeah, a little bit after the first day, we reached our initial funding goal, which is great because that just means that the book will exist in some capacity and people will have access to it and get to look at the pretty pictures or play it ultimately. But yeah, right now we're coming up on our first stretch goal. We got quite a few more. I don't know how far into the stretch goals that we'll get, but some of the items on there are free stickers, bonus art for the zine, potentially a digital comic illustrated by Corey Lewis, starting adventures, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm just happy. This is definitely a passion project for me. So making it into a reality is like the big thrust of it, and getting it out there for people to enjoy is, what it's all about. So everything after that is just sort of icing on the cake for everyone who's supporting it and for us who are making it. So I'm really happy that everyone supported this thus far. I'm happy that we have the opportunity to still fund it and get it into more people's hands. And yeah, thank you for doing this show, and hopefully getting it in front of a few more people who might be interested, and helping to support us in that endeavor.
Yeah,
really
we'll put a
lot.
link to the Kickstarter in the show notes, folks. Follow that. This is part of Zine Quest 2024, which is when Kickstarter encourages people to put out little zine-sized role-playing games. I don't know if other types of zines are included. All I ever see the role-playing ones. Zines used to be about all kinds of different things. Usually punk music, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think yeah, totally. Well, I think that's sort of what's great about it, right? Is like in tabletop RPGs and punk scenes, they both like had a zine moment, and it was around the same time frame, and they were both sort of evolving at the same time. And like as a punk musician myself, and as like a tabletop RPG designer myself, I get a big kick out of the crossover of that type of thing. But yeah, the Kickstarter Zine Quest is pretty uniquely tabletop RPG oriented. So,
all right. Well, Clipper, thank you so much for joining us here today. Folks, as always, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review us wherever it is you're listening to us. You can find links to all our stuff at mmftg.com. And of course, if you want to support the show, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/mmftg.com. And as I said, check out our show notes for the link to the Kickstarter, and I will put the link to your regular webpage in there as well. Thanks again for joining me, Clipper.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Until next time, I have been Precious D. Remember to keep calm and take shelter in basements. Whatever you do, do not misuse science. We will not see you, but you will hear us next time on Monster Movie Fun Time Go. You've been listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your podcasting platform of choice. Our theme song is by the Texacato Folk Rock Punk featuring Lita Lopez. You can support the show, find links to our social media, and even leave us a voice message at anchor.fm/mmftg.